What would happen if the Earth suddenly stopped spinning? Imagine this. Right now, Earth is spinning at a speed of roughly 1,670 kilometers per hour near the equator. You don't feel it. The streets aren't moving. The buildings aren't moving. Even the phone in your hand is sitting perfectly still. But in reality, you're standing on a giant spinning planet. Earth rotates from west to east, completing one full rotation roughly every 24 hours. This rotation gives us day and night. It makes the sun appear to rise in the east and set in the west. But what if, in the very next second, Earth suddenly stopped spinning? What would happen? You might think that if Earth stopped, we would all stop with it. But the truth is exactly the opposite. If Earth suddenly stopped rotating, you might not even have time to react, because the Earth would stop. But you wouldn't. And what happens next could become one of the most terrifying disasters in Earth's history. The first second, you wouldn't simply stop. Let's imagine that, right now, Earth suddenly stops rotating. No warning. No gradual slowdown. No time to prepare. In an instant, the entire planet stops spinning. But you, the atmosphere, the oceans, cars, and everything else on Earth's surface, would not immediately stop. Why? Because of inertia. Before the Earth stopped, you were moving along with the planet. Near the equator, Earth's rotational speed is roughly 1,670 kilometers per hour. That's faster than the cruising speed of many commercial airplanes. So when the ground suddenly stops moving, your body would continue moving in the same direction. The result? The ground stops, but you keep moving eastward. It's similar to what happens inside a car traveling at extremely high speed. If the car suddenly stops, the passengers don't magically stop with it. They continue moving forward. But Earth's situation would be far more terrifying. Because this isn't a car. It's an entire planet. Would humans be thrown into space? The answer is, in many places, people would indeed be thrown violently toward the east because of inertia, especially near the equator. But there's an important detail. Not every location on Earth is moving at the same speed. The rotational speed is greatest near the equator. The closer you get to the North or South Pole, the slower the rotational speed becomes. At the poles themselves, there is almost no horizontal rotational speed. So if you were standing near the equator when Earth suddenly stopped, you would continue moving eastward at an incredible speed. But if you were standing near one of the poles, the situation would be very different. You wouldn't be launched eastward at 1,670 kilometers per hour. This means the consequences of Earth's sudden stop would depend heavily on where you were located. Equatorial regions would experience some of the most violent effects. But humans wouldn't be the only ones affected. The atmosphere would become a global disaster. Now let's look at the atmosphere. Earth stops spinning. But the atmosphere doesn't immediately stop. The air would continue moving. This means the entire atmosphere would behave like a gigantic wall of air rushing eastward. Near the equator, the air could continue moving at speeds of more than 1,000 kilometers per hour. This would create a global atmospheric disaster unlike anything humans have ever experienced. Not an ordinary storm. Not a hurricane. Not even a tornado. It would be something far beyond anything we can experience today. Buildings could be destroyed. Forests could be ripped apart. Vehicles could be thrown through the air. Massive amounts of debris could become deadly projectiles. And this wouldn't only happen near the ground. The entire atmosphere, from the surface to the upper layers, would be affected. Eventually, Earth's surface would experience an enormous wave of high-speed atmospheric movement. For humans, this could be one of the first major threats to survival. But the air wouldn't be the only thing moving. The oceans would be even more terrifying. What would happen to the oceans? The oceans are far more massive than the atmosphere. And if Earth suddenly stopped rotating, the oceans wouldn't stop immediately either. They would continue moving. So what would happen? Imagine the entire global ocean continuing to move eastward at tremendous speeds. The result could be catastrophic. Massive waves would rush across the planet. Coastal regions could be overwhelmed. Ports could disappear. Islands could be flooded. and entire coastal cities could be destroyed. But this wouldn't simply be one giant tsunami. Instead, it would be a massive redistribution of Earth's oceans. The water would continue moving because of its enormous inertia, and it would take a long time for the oceans to settle into a new equilibrium. The map of the world's coastlines could eventually look completely different. But something even stranger would happen. Now we come to one of the most fascinating effects. You may not know this, but Earth's rotation creates a small centrifugal effect. This effect causes Earth's equatorial region to bulge slightly outward. That's why Earth isn't a perfect sphere. It's slightly wider around the equator and slightly flatter near the poles. But if Earth suddenly stopped rotating, that centrifugal effect would disappear, and the shape of the planet would slowly begin to change. The oceans would eventually respond to this change. Over time, water would gradually redistribute toward higher latitudes. The oceans could move away from the equatorial regions. Eventually, massive new bodies of water could form closer to the poles. Meanwhile, parts of the equatorial regions could become exposed land. The geography of Earth could be completely rewritten. Would the sun still rise? Now here's another important question. If Earth stopped rotating, would the sun still rise? The answer is not in the way we're used to. The sun appears to rise in the east and set in the west because Earth rotates. If Earth completely stopped rotating, the sun would no longer travel across the sky every 24 hours. But here's the important part. Earth would still orbit the sun. So the sun's position in the sky would still change over time. But this change would happen extremely slowly. Instead of a normal 24-hour day, a complete solar cycle could last almost an entire year. That means some parts of Earth could experience months of continuous daylight, followed by months of darkness. Imagine the sun remaining in the sky for months, with no normal nighttime. The surface would continuously absorb solar energy. Temperatures would rise dramatically. Water would evaporate. Huge amounts of water vapor would enter the atmosphere. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the planet, the situation would be completely different. One side of Earth would become a giant oven. Imagine a region receiving sunlight continuously for months, without a normal day-night cycle. The surface would continue absorbing solar radiation. Temperatures would rise. Water would evaporate. The atmosphere would become saturated with moisture. And the global climate system would begin to change dramatically. Massive temperature differences would develop between different regions. Hot air would rise. Cold air would move in. Huge atmospheric circulation patterns would form. Extreme weather systems could develop. The climate patterns we know today would be completely destroyed. The dark side would enter a long winter. On the opposite side of Earth, there would be no sunlight for months. The surface would continuously lose heat. Temperatures would fall. Lakes would freeze. Rivers would freeze. Eventually, parts of the ocean surface could begin to freeze as well. Plants would struggle to survive because they couldn't perform normal photosynthesis. Agriculture would collapse. And once plants began disappearing, the entire food chain would be affected. Herbivores would lose their food. Predators would lose their prey. Eventually, entire ecosystems could collapse. So one of the most dangerous consequences of Earth stopping its rotation wouldn't simply be people being thrown through the air. It would be the complete destruction of the climate system that supports life as we know it. Could humans survive? If Earth suddenly stopped rotating, the answer would probably be most humans would not survive the immediate aftermath. The first wave of disasters alone could be devastating. Extreme winds, massive ocean movement, tsunamis, fires, collapsing buildings, extreme temperatures, the collapse of agriculture. All of these factors combined would create an unprecedented global crisis. But that doesn't necessarily mean all life on Earth would disappear. Some regions might remain more habitable than others. One possibility could be the region between the permanent day side and the permanent night side. This area would exist near the boundary between extreme heat and extreme cold. It could experience something similar to an endless twilight, if liquid water remained available. And if the atmosphere stayed stable enough, life might still be possible there. Of course, this is only a theoretical possibility. The real situation would be far more complicated. The atmosphere, the oceans, the climate, and ecosystems would all be changing at the same time. Would Earth's magnetic field disappear? Now we come to another common question. If Earth stopped rotating, would Earth's magnetic field disappear? Many people assume the answer is yes. But it's not that simple. Earth's magnetic field is primarily generated by the movement of liquid metal inside the outer core. It isn't simply created by the rotation of the planet itself. So if Earth suddenly stopped rotating, the magnetic field would not instantly disappear. However, if Earth's rotation remained stopped for an extremely long period, the internal dynamics of the planet could potentially change. Whether Earth's magnetic field would remain stable over geological timescales is a much more complicated question. If the magnetic field eventually weakened significantly, more high-energy particles from the Sun and cosmic radiation could reach Earth's atmosphere. This could create additional challenges for life. But in the short term, Earth's magnetic field would not suddenly vanish just because the planet stopped spinning. Would Earth stop orbiting the Sun? No. This is another common misconception. Earth's rotation and Earth's orbit are two completely different things. Rotation means Earth spins around its own axis. Revolution means Earth travels around the Sun. If Earth stopped rotating, it would still continue orbiting the Sun. The Sun's gravity would still hold Earth in its orbit. So Earth wouldn't suddenly fall into the Sun. And it wouldn't suddenly fly away from the solar system. But even though Earth would remain in orbit, life on the planet would become extremely difficult. What if Earth slowly stopped spinning? Now let's imagine a different scenario. Instead of stopping instantly, what if Earth slowly lost its rotational speed over millions or even billions of years? The result would be completely different. Humans wouldn't be thrown into the air. There wouldn't be an instant global tsunami. The atmosphere wouldn't suddenly become a wall of high-speed wind, because everything would have time to gradually adapt. But the length of a day would slowly increase. 24 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours, and eventually, much longer. The periods of daylight and darkness would also become longer. Climate systems would slowly change. Ecosystems would gradually adapt. Humans might even have time to develop technologies to survive in the new environment. But if Earth eventually stopped rotating completely, we would still face a planet with extremely long periods of daylight and darkness, and an entirely different climate. Could Earth become tidally locked? There's another fascinating possibility. If Earth's rotation gradually slowed down, it could potentially reach a state known as tidal locking. This is similar to what happens with the Moon. The Moon is tidally locked to Earth, meaning the same side of the Moon always faces us. If Earth somehow became tidally locked to the Sun, one side of the planet would permanently face the Sun. That side would become extremely hot. The opposite side would permanently face away from the Sun. That side would become extremely cold. Between them would be a permanent transition zone, a region of endless sunrise or sunset. The Sun might always remain near the horizon. If liquid water and a suitable atmosphere existed there, that region could potentially become one of the most habitable areas on the planet. Of course, this is an extreme theoretical scenario, and Earth is not naturally expected to suddenly stop rotating anytime soon. There is no normal mechanism that could make our planet instantly come to a complete stop. So, you don't have to worry about Earth suddenly stopping tomorrow. So why does Earth keep spinning? This is actually a fascinating question. Earth rotates because it inherited angular momentum from the material that formed the solar system. About 4.6 billion years ago, the solar system formed from a massive cloud of gas and dust. As gravity pulled this material together, the material began rotating faster as it collapsed. Eventually, this process created the Sun and the planets, including Earth. Ever since then, Earth has continued to rotate. There is nothing powerful enough in the normal environment of space to suddenly stop such a massive planet. In fact, Earth's rotation is slowly slowing down. One of the main reasons is tidal friction caused by the Moon. So while Earth rotates every day, over extremely long periods of time, its rotation is gradually slowing. Where would humans go? If Earth really did stop rotating, where would humans have the best chance of surviving? The safest places might be far from coastlines, away from the equator, and equipped with stable energy supplies and underground facilities. Underground shelters, large protected facilities, higher latitude regions. These could potentially become important survival zones. But the real challenge would be, could humanity maintain food production? Could we generate enough energy? Could we continue industrial production? Could we maintain social order? Modern civilization depends on an incredibly stable planetary environment. We're used to a 24-hour day, a 365-day year, predictable seasons, stable climate patterns, stable oceans, reliable agriculture. If Earth suddenly stopped rotating, all of these systems would begin to change. The greatest threat might not be one single disaster. It might be something much larger. The environment that supports human civilization would no longer be stable. The final question. So, what would happen if Earth suddenly stopped rotating? In the first second, you could continue moving because of inertia. The atmosphere and oceans would continue moving as well. The planet would experience catastrophic winds and enormous water movement. Within hours, superstorms and massive waves could sweep across the world. After one day, the familiar cycle of day and night would already be gone. If Earth remained in this state for a long time, some regions could experience months of daylight. Others could experience months of darkness. The oceans could redistribute. Ecosystems could collapse. And modern civilization could face the greatest crisis in human history. But here's the good news. This scenario is almost impossible to happen suddenly. Earth has enormous mass and angular momentum. There is no normal mechanism in the universe that could make our planet instantly stop rotating. So the next time you watch the sun rise in the east, or look at the stars at night, or sit quietly in your room, remember this. You're standing on a giant planet. It's spinning at incredible speed. At the same time, Earth is orbiting the sun at tens of kilometers per second. And yet, you don't feel any of it. Because you, the atmosphere, the oceans, and everything around you, are all moving together. Perhaps one of the most incredible things about our universe is this. We live on a world that is constantly moving at incredible speeds. Yet somehow, it feels like we're standing perfectly still.